Okay, another entry to the exercise archive of explaining why we do certain exercises and following that, how I recommend you execute them. I'm kind of doing the more commonly prescribed ones, working to the rarer ones. So this is probably going to be one of the more common lower body ones, which is single leg press. And you have to realize when we do these, we have two very different roles we might be trying to accomplish. One is as a deadlift accessory, because you hear people talk about quad strength in the deadlift, which I think is not a thing. It doesn't exist. If your quads were what was breaking it off the floor primarily, everybody would be really strong off the floor, because with your knee that close to full extension, your quads are in a position to output a ridiculous amount of force, right? If you could do what you could do for a quarter leg press as force into the ground off a deadlift, then we would all be cranking a grand off the ground, but we're not, right? Off the floor, in my opinion, is largely glutes. I once watched some interview with Eddie Hall, and he was talking about how strong your ass needs to be to break a deadlift off the ground. And that got me thinking, yeah, that makes a lot more sense that the drive off the ground is from your glutes, not your quads. Otherwise, I don't know where that idea came from, but I think it's wrong. Maybe in the sumo you have more of an argument for quad strength being relevant. That's fair, but in a conventional deadlift especially, does not strike me as very relevant. So instead, we focus on that drive off the ground type motion from what mirrors your conventional stance, right? You're going to go narrow and you're going to go fairly low on the pad. And you're focusing on bringing your knee towards your chest, getting an adequate range of motion to where you're really getting a good ROM out of your glute. So it's not just strengthening your quads, which it's going to do, but it's also really hitting your glute and your ability to stabilize your leg, which brings me to the other point momentarily. Basically, as a deadlift accessory, you're just focusing on mirroring a single leg version of your conventional stance and building your glute for that drive off the ground. That's basically the whole thing. It's pretty simple. I think it works pretty well compared to other ways of building strength off the floor. And the other is as more of a squat accessory, right? So we're going to be able to get more volume in your quad and your glute without running up more volume on your low back, which is usually the limiting factor as far as like other exercises that strengthen your legs, right? So you're going to be able to get that additional volume, because usually by the time your low back fails while squatting, you still could handle a fair bit more volume in your legs, so you may as well capitalize on it. And the second role is much like a split squat, much like a single leg RDL. It's working on your ability to stabilize off of a single leg, because if you can stabilize off of a single leg, stabilizing off of both legs becomes a lot easier, right? And so when you're doing them on a squat day, which is usually the indicator that it's a squat accessory rather than a deadlift accessory, you're going to move still low on the sled, but you're going to be low and slightly more out to the side, and you're going to let your knee track rather than more center chest. It's going to come out more towards your armpit. You're going to let it track out a little bit, still focusing on getting a really big ROM. The big be careful on these is making sure your lower back is not peeling up off the pad, or you're just going to pinch nerves and you'll be uncomfortable the next day. It's not a debilitating injury, but it's very annoying, which happened to me a lot when I first started training. But you're going to let it track out, and you should very much feel your adductors the entire set if you're doing it this way. Probably both ways, but if you're not feeling your adductors the other way, it's not the worst thing in the world, but if you're letting it track outward a little bit, you should feel it contracting the entire time. And it should get them pretty sore. If it's not, you might be doing them wrong. Not a guarantee, but you might be. Yeah,